Well, hello, everybody. My name is Cheryl Luke, and I'm so glad that you all have joined us. I'm so grateful that you have decided to come and see. I have a group of people who are here with me, and I'll introduce all of them to you later. But I just wanted to take a minute and give you an overview of Celebrate Recovery cultural communities. We exist to uniquely support Black, Latina, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, and other people of color, along with their families and their churches, in doing the hard work of recovery. And I'm really grateful that Pastor John Baker and his family have set this ministry up as a way for people of color to find freedom and to find healing. And we'll talk more about who we are as a ministry. We'll talk more about Celebrate Recovery a little bit later, but tonight we're going to unpack what it looks like to be a part of Celebrate Recovery cultural communities. And my goal is to present the heart and soul of this ministry. And I honestly believe that we are on the cusp of a movement of healing that will affect our nation. And what an honor it is to be able to watch this happen. Celebrate Recovery is a ministry that's been around for 30 years. It has affected over 7 million lives. It has been a part of over 30,000 churches worldwide. And so it's not a new ministry. It's something that's been around a long time, but cultural communities is brand new. We're entering our second year of active ministry, our fourth year of being around as part of Celebrate Recovery. And I am just blessed that we're here. And tonight you're going to hear personal story, you're going to hear testimony, you're going to hear stories about people's lives that have been changed drastically through the process of the 12-step ministry. And you'll also hear from some of my friends whom I'll introduce in a little bit. Before we go to the panel, I'd like to introduce to you Pastor Johnny Baker. And before I do that, I just want to take a moment for John Baker and Cheryl Baker and the work that they've done through the years. You know, I've had the privilege of watching Celebrate Recovery from afar for several years before I joined the team. And I've watched this group of people work with their heads down to ensure that everybody has the ability to, people of color can enter the 12-step program led by people of color. This ministry is for people of color. And Johnny, I just want to say thank you so much. Pastor Johnny and Jenny, they oversee Celebrate Recovery. They are the executive global directors of this ministry, and that will be the next voice you will hear. Pastor Johnny Baker.
Hey, everybody. So glad to be with you tonight. My name is Johnny. I'm a grateful believer. I struggle with alcoholism and codependency.
Hi, I'm Jenny, and I'm a believer who struggles with codependency, and I'm an adult.
Something that's really important to know is that cultural communities is a core value of Celebrate Recovery. A number of years ago, we kind of came up with a couple of different things that we looked at and we said, these are core values that need to be instilled in every Celebrate Recovery. Mental health ministry was one, and the other is cultural communities. And what happened was that a few summits ago, my parents, John and Cheryl Baker, stood on stage and looked out at the summit and they said, wow, there are way too few people of color in this room, and we need to do a better job of making sure that everybody knows that Celebrate Recovery is a safe place for them. And so that's what cultural communities is all about. What do you want to?
Yeah, Indigenous and other people of color and their families as they engage in the hard work of Celebrate Recovery. What we're doing through cultural communities is we are being intentional about solving an unintentional problem. The unintentional problem being that Pastor John and Cheryl and Johnny and I looked at and realized that Celebrate Recovery is predominantly white. We say it's unintentional because we didn't design it that way. We didn't set it up that way, but we do have to be intentional about fixing that problem. And so one of the steps that we are taking steps through Celebrate Recovery and through cultural communities to fix that. And one of those is that we are creating a safe place for people of color to engage in recovery.
Yeah, and it's really important that we just address this up front too. This isn't segregation, right? We're not trying to keep people separate because of any other reason except to try to create safe places. And so as Cheryl to be together, so they have a safe place to share, to meet together, to take some steps in between in the meantime. And so if you're watching this and you're thinking, I'm not sure how I feel about that, just hang out for a little while. Let us go through everything we're doing tonight. And we hope that you'll feel comfortable. We hope that you'll become a part of our ministry. If you're not a person of color and you're watching this, there's so many things that we can do to support this and to go alongside with this. And so I would just encourage you to watch and listen to these stories and the things that we're going to talk about as well tonight. And I really want to drive this home. This isn't an optional part of Celebrate Recovery.
Yes.
This isn't something that we can kind of decide, do we go into what we're trying to do with Celebrate Recovery, with spreading the good news to others, with yielding ourselves to God. We need to make sure that we're actively talk about these things. We hope you'll come alongside us as we do this. We hope that you'll feel comfortable here. And we just hope that you know that this power of that Jesus has to change lives is available to everyone.
And we're committed to this. Johnny and I, we're committed to this. Celebrate Recovery, national.
Now, it's one thing for us to talk about all of these things, but I think it's always great to hear a testimony of changed life. I love hearing testimonies. I would rather hear a testimony than a sermon any day. And so we've actually invited someone to share her testimony. And so would you please welcome my friend Alice as she shares her testimony with us tonight.
All right. Hi, my name is Alice. I'm a grateful believer, and I'm a survivor of sexual abuse and struggle with codependency, fear, control, low self-worth, people-pleasing, and my finances. I'll never forget the first time I recognized that Celebrate Recovery had been trying to get my attention for a while, shouting through my pain. I'd heard of CR, but carried the common misbelief that it was primarily for those people who struggled with alcohol, drugs, or chemical addiction. Certainly not me. It wasn't until a church event when I heard someone share about how the freedom he found from his struggle with codependency and his finances that the blinds from my eyes dropped. Born in Los Angeles, I grew up in a loving Korean-American Christian home of two hardworking, college-educated parents who came to the US to build a new life. The third of four siblings, I was an attention-seeking middle child feeling out of place like the ugly duckling. I wasn't as pretty, as smart as my smart older sister, the eldest, who would eventually become a successful doctor, married with 3 kids. I wasn't the youngest, or maknae, as it's often said in Korean, like my rambunctious favored younger brother. Lastly, I was outranked by my older brother, who was, dramatic pause, the first son, the premier position, with even higher expectations in Korean culture. Envy is a thing, a real Asian struggle, in case any of you were wondering. I used dry cleaning business, or the kage, or store in Korean. The kage kept them busy. In reality, they were just trying to make ends meet, juggling 4 children and my grandmother, who also lived with us. In those tender years, I learned to minimize and compartmentalize my pain, repressing a family secret of my own sexual abuse as a child, unaware that my innocence was stolen, my sexual curiosity hijacked, and my natural boundaries blurred. By college, I was a pro at ignoring I strived to live up to the expectations drilled into me from childhood that eventually became the expectations I set for myself. I refused to trust God in every area of my life because I doubted God would lead me toward a good path that I also desired. My distorted view of Christian principles gave me more permission to act out as I compartmentalized my church life, my school and work life, and my love life. These all eventually caught up with me when I found myself in a full-blown, codependent, verbally abusive relationship, which resulted in an unplanned pregnancy and unwanted abortion. It was during this time I discovered Saddleback Church, where I could disappear in the back and feel loved. But I was still numbing myself from an emotional hole and succumbed again to my compulsive desires, promiscuity, and continued to spend money I didn't have by racking up credit card debt, taking on more loans and 2 more graduate degrees in pursuit of that dream job and life status. When I got pregnant again with the same person, believing this time would be different, the relationship quickly unraveled and escalated to physical abuse, piling on more shame and self-loathing. In September of 2007, out of another failed relationship, was struggling at work, feeling increasingly anxious and constantly. 3 days later, I jumped into a step study, uncertain of what I was saying yes to. That became the most transformative decision of my life, a journey that has yielded profound healing, peace, and restoration. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behavior, that our lives had become unmanageable. Through Celebrate Recovery, I finally stepped out of the denial of the chaos and destruction that my codependency was creating in my life, emotionally, financially, and physically. My addiction was to people-pleasing, fixing, control over functioning, putting other people's needs at the expense of my own, and being overly loyal to the point of staying in harmful situations too long. I faced the emotional wounds of my past, identifying my triggers, breaking old patterns, and learning how to say no freed me to focus on my needs and self-care, which in turn allowed me to be more present with my daughter. CR became a safe place to practice building healthy relationships and receive guidance from my trusted mentors. Some of these people I call my dearest friends and do life together. I also enjoy a more intimate relationship with Jesus and am learning to seek self-worth according to whose I am in my Heavenly Father's eyes, where I'm able to step out of denial with my debt and surrender my finances. I started tithing and budgeting consistently. I'm on a clear path toward being debt-free. Staying connected to my CR family and supporting others has continued to be a lifeline for me through more job losses, my breast cancer diagnosis in 2018, and COVID. Romans 8:28 says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Reflecting back, I know now that God allowed me to take the long way through the wilderness to prepare me for what was ahead. With each pain, the more I realized the fullness of God's grace and mercy on me. I had to turn my will over completely. Through CR and the power of the Holy Spirit, my mind was being transformed to where I now want to follow him because I don't want to go backwards. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Alice. We really appreciate you sharing your testimony. And just like Johnny said, you know, testimonies are, they're the lifeblood of Celebrate Recovery. And I agree with you, Johnny. I'd rather hear a testimony over a sermon any day of the week, because you see the evidence of a changed life. And that's Anil. And I am so excited about this time together. We have the Dr. Anita Phillips, who is a therapist. She's a speaker. She's a podcast host. She is a ministry leader. She is all the things and the bag of chips and the t-shirt. Dr. Anita, we love you so very much and so grateful that you're here. And also have Socrates Perez, who is a new friend of mine. He is a gifted worshiper, singer, songwriter. He's one of the worship leaders at Saddleback Church. And so Socrates, we're so glad that you're here. And we also have Johnny and Jenny Baker, who again are the global leaders for this amazing ministry. So welcome to a time of conversation, you guys. So glad you're here.
So happy to be here.
Okay, so before we go on, I just would love Pastors Johnny and Jenny just to take a moment and give an overview of Celebrate Recovery, the ministry, the umbrella ministry, so that if anyone's listening and they don't know what we are, what we do, I'd love to start there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program. It's based on the 12-step model. It was started at Saddleback Church in 1991 by my parents like us. And God had bigger plans and turned it into this worldwide movement that we're so fortunate to get to be a part of. It's for anybody with a hurt, hang up, or habit. And we say that phrase a lot. Really what that means is that everyone, of course, something just got dropped out of the house. Always. What that means is that everyone qualifies for Celebrate Recovery. And so if you're breathing, you qualify, and we're glad that you're a part of it. And so often the misconception is that that really Celebrate Recovery is for drug addicts and alcoholics. And although it is for people who struggle with those issues, only about a third of the people who attend Celebrate Recovery come for an addiction issue. 2/3 of the people come from a wide variety of other issues. And it's a church-based program. And so over 30,000 churches all over the world have a Celebrate Recovery ministry. And, it's something that of course, while couldn't have happened a minute ago when we weren't on camera with our mic unmuted. But so that's kind of a brief overview of Celebrate Recovery. And you said, when you brought it up, when you started, Cheryl, 7 million people have gone through a Celebrate Recovery step study. So pretty cool to see what God has done.
It is amazing to see what God has done. I think the other amazing piece is how he brought you into our family, Dr. Anita. And one of the things that you talk about is mental health and recovery go hand in hand. And you also talk about the fact that everyone needs recovery. Would you just kind of expound on that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I specialized in addictions during my first graduate degree because I felt like it's one of the hardest, if not the hardest change to make, right? I was living in Baltimore City at the time, and there was a 1 in 4 heroin addiction rate. And so I felt like I couldn't be, it would be not smart for me to leave graduate school without having some expertise in working with addictions. And I remember the first professor I had, kind of addictions 101 for counselors. And she said, treat every single person that you will ask them, oh, drugs, alcohol, they'll be like, no, but they won't volunteer that they're addicted to pornography or shopping or gambling. They'll feel like they have them to control, and that's not really the problem. At the right time, under the right circumstances, we are all capable of being addicted to some behavior. And it's humbling and clarifying. And so I think Celebrate Recovery is so awesome because there's an opportunity for us to work through addictive behaviors of all kinds. It's not like Pastor Johnny said, it's not just substances or chemicals, but all of these other things that people can work through. Codependency, which is one of the biggest thing that I get questions about. So as a therapist, but CR is, first of all, it's free. Let's just throw that out there. All you got to do is buy the workbooks and stuff, but you don't have to pay every time you show up. You don't have to bill your insurance. It's a ministry. And so here are a group of people who are coming together to be honest, to be real, and to shed just all of the fake stuff. I mean, Alice's testimony was so amazing. I bet people were just struck by her saying, hey, here I am with all of these different things that I've worked through, financial issues, codependency issues. And so I've been so honored to be connected to CR for just over a year now. Stick around for messy stuff. It's not what I do. I love all of you who follow me and who follow my ministry. I respect you so much. And so I would never offer you something that I didn't believe in 100%. And I believe 100% in Celebrate Recovery. And I'm so excited that we have this opportunity to have groups that are safe for people of color because, man, they landed in 2020 at the right time. Absolutely. And it's not over. We're going through the trial of the men who killed Ahmaud Arbery right now. We're going through the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse right now. And people of color all over the country and people of not color are holding our breath. Will there be justice? And these kind of things are triggering. And so to have a space where people can talk about that safely and how it can be difficult with all the other things they're working on in their lives, that's what this is for. And it's making a huge difference. And I'm just so proud to be a part of it. So I'm rambling a little, but I just love CR so much.
We love you. If you could hear the stories of some of the men and women that have listened to your podcast that follow you, who are now in recovery, it would blow your mind. So we are truly grateful for you and your ministry. And, talking about the incidences of 2020, I am in a 12-step group right now. And the impact that those events had on my life, and I'm able to share the trauma that I've experienced. And there's not any editing, and I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding back. I'm able just to put it all on the table and know that there's no misunderstanding. And not that everybody would misunderstand, but I'm not trying to hold my words. I'm not trying to edit. And the difference the healing that I'm receiving, that I've received over this past year, has been absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. Okay, I'd love to go to Socrates. And Socrates, you are, first of all, a phenomenal singer and a worshiper. And if any of you were at Summit this year, you got to experience Socrates. And I'd like for you, Seller, what has recovery done for you? How has it affected your life?
Yeah, you guys are so kind. Thanks for the kind words. And yeah, I'm Socrates, grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with codependency and anxiety and people pleasing. And I have such a deep love for CR. We have, been in relationship with this ministry with Johnny and Jenny for many years now. Love partnering with them in worship and what we do in the events. But just before I get into answer your question, if I could greet everybody in Spanish, because I would love to just reach out to people who are listening that may speak Spanish as a first language. So saludos a todos mis latinos, latinas, mirando y escuchando esta noche. Y si le podrías dar un abrazo fuerte, lo haría. Para que puedan de Jesucristo. Así que gracias por estar aquí y escuchar. And I was just greeting and just saying to my Latina brothers and sisters who are listening that if I could give them a hug right now, I would. But I hope that you feel the love and the warmth from all around so far this evening. And that we're, I've found Celebrate Recovery's program just to be so helpful to honestly like face some of the lies that I've told myself about myself over the years, and to walk in the truth of what God says about who I am in him. And so some of how that relates to my story, I'm a second generation Dominican American, which means that my parents were born in the Dominican Republic and moved to the US a few years ago before I was born and raised here. Sorry, not a few years ago, a few years before I was born and raised here. And so that led to me growing up in different environments, dominant white churches, where that was just the predominant demographic. And then I also grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly Black, and went to a school where, I was usually the lightest skinned kid in class, and just had just great friends that were Black, and was surrounded in that culture as well. So I loved each environment, and I considered it a major blessing. I still do, that I was able to experience all of that, fully belonged or fit into any one of those, right? And I didn't feel white enough. I didn't feel Latino enough. Sometimes my Spanish would falter around family. I didn't feel Black enough. I wish I could sing like Brian McKnight. I wish I could sing like Chris Tomlin, but that's just not my voice, And so I struggled like feeling the need to seek approval of my peers and authorities. And I've had a few moments in my life when I was told like to tone myself down in dominant white spaces, and my expressiveness down, attention. And that's not what I was going for. So I felt a lot of shame in that moment, and because of that and other instances, like minor or major instances like that over the years, that message was reinforced. And I always felt like I had to be a certain way, or conform to a certain model. And some people call that assimilation too, right? What space I was in. So to be excellent, but not stick out in an unacceptable way. And I especially had to think about this in like I said, in predominantly white churches, because to be honest, I've gotten really good at it over the years. And it's made me question and have to work through what is really me, and what is me that's trying to be who I need to be to thrive in a dominant culture. And so, getting to CR gave me language to help think about that better than I've ever been able to think about. And so like, I was actually straight up like looking at the CR website this morning, where it talks about codependency, and how codependency is when, I'll read this. It says it's when a person's need for approval or validation from another person allows them to be controlled or manipulated, or a person who choices and behavior at the expense of their personal well-being. And I read that or altering or denying how one truly feels, or living with messages of not being good enough or valued, worrying about how others may respond to your feelings. Fear of it's like, whoa, this is like so connecting with things that I've dealt with, and it gave me language. And so because I'm honestly able to name the narratives that have weighed on me and weighed me down, I can bring them before God now and surrender them to him and trust God daily that he's going to help me walk in the freedom of who he's created me to be. So it's just been so helpful. And I think last thing I'd add, because I know I'll be with, has been it just because there's an intentional space like made to wrestle with all this verbally and to process honestly in a way I've never been able to do before. And I'm in a group with a great group of guys, some men of color, some aren't, but it's just an incredible space to be able to like process this stuff. And so if you haven't done a step study before, there's no better time to get into one. And whoever's listening, even if you don't know what you'd be in CR for, honestly, like it'll help you uncover an area where you didn't realize you needed that freedom. So that's how it's helped me.
Thank you so much. You know, the panel's going a little long, but I do want to talk a little bit more about codependency. Dr. Anita, I just listened to your podcast. I believe it was last week where it was right after this previous show where you were talking about codependency and what it is. And it was pretty interesting. And Jenny, if you don't mind talking about codependency as well, I would like to camp there for a minute because I think that a lot more people deal with codependency than we or they realize. So Jenny, I think I'll start with you and then Dr. Anita, and then we'll close the panel.
So yeah, codependency. Whew. There's a lot of definition that Socrates just read is one that applies to me so perfectly. When I got into it, I was willing to give up every part of myself and every part of my marriage to even I wasn't happy. And it was like, I tripped over myself to make her happy. Her happiness was my goal in life. And so that was a problem. I had codependency with Johnny and that I was an enabler. I knew he was drinking, but I never called him out on it because I was too scared. I was too scared that he would leave me, that I wouldn't be worth the conflict of calling him out. Gosh, there can be codependency with my kids when I try to control them, when I worry and fear about their future. And so I want to control because my fear for their choices gets out of control. And so I try to control them. I feel like I didn't say that right. My fear, worry for their choices makes me want to over control them. And so that's codependency, right? Because I'm not trusting that God has them. If I can just control their moves, then it's going to be okay. Gosh, I could go on and on about what my codependent recovery and in my codependency is. The core value of my codependency comes down to where am I finding my value? When I'm finding my value in other people, then I'm being extremely codependent. I'm letting other people's truths be my truths. Say no, are they going to love me still? Am I still worth being their friend? Are they going to like me if I say no? But if I put my value in God instead, then I can set those boundaries that I need to set. Then I don't have to worry about saying no. Then I can say yes when I need to, and I can say no when I need to. So that's just a really brief, that's where I got to in my recovery, is that my core value is valuable.
Okay. You know, I think one of the most important things for us to recognize about codependency is that it's a response to we start out as children wanting to have something called co-regulation. And co-regulation means that in partnership with another human being, I'm able to find emotional safety. We go straight from the womb with that, right? I mean, from the womb, breastfeeding, being held by your mom, those early sounds and arms and smells where when you cry, someone picked you up and comforted you. That's co-regulation. We did that together. And so as we grow up, we naturally seek safe relationships. Safety eventually is absorbed so that you're able to regulate yourself. There's that safe space. You absorb those warm mother arms. You absorb that father protectiveness. You absorb the hug of a best friend. And when all of those things are screwy, we don't have the opportunity to develop self-regulation by absorbing kind of those relationships inside of ourselves, if that makes sense. And so then we can spend our lives essentially trying to co-regulate. That's really on a base level kind of what codependency is me, my inner child is still trying to co-regulate, have a safe emotional space with someone that I can eventually walk away with that stays within me so that I can feel safe when I'm alone. And I wanted to share that because we can be so hard on ourselves. Like, I'm codependent, like I'm faulty, I do things wrong in relationships. But if we look at the fact that we didn't have the co-regulation experiences that we needed at different times in our lives, or something came along and dysregulated us, maybe a trauma or something like that, we naturally want to have safety in relationships and have emotional safety in relationships that we can feel calm and relaxed and safe. And so I think a group is so wonderful for this, because while we're talking about it, the safety of the group, absorb the relationships that we make in the group, and remember when we're somewhere else, oh, I know what it feels like to feel safe in this group. I can carry that safety with me and begin to bring it into other relationships. So I think groups are especially phenomenal for codependency. But I want all of you guys to forgive yourselves who have beat yourself up about being codependent, and realize that you just probably missed out on those co-regulation opportunities as a child, and your inner child's still trying to co-regulate. And so now we take responsibility as grown-ups to raise our inner child and help him or her feel safe enough. And this group is one of the ways that you can do that.
I love that you just said that about group being a safe place to learn to co-regulate. For me personally, I wasn't allowed to share my feelings. And when specifically what Recovery Open Share Group and Step Study allowed me to do is a safe place to share my feelings, where no one was telling me, don't feel that way. You can't feel that way. That's the wrong way to feel. And it was a safe place to learn to identify my feelings and be able to share those feelings and have them validated. And so I love that you pointed that out, because that was a big benefit for me in my recovery.
Cultures, right? The addictions do, codependency does, knows that they have a place where they can come and find that healing and find that group. Like Cheryl said earlier, where you're not going to have to worry about, is this going to be accepted if I say this? Am I going to have to defend this? Is this going to rub somebody the wrong way? And so that's why we're doing what we're doing here. I want to introduce another testimony to you tonight, because again, I just think testimonies are so important, and I would love for you to hear this next testimony. So would you, I know it's kind of weird because we're, behind our screens, but just welcome Carlos as he shares.
Okay, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and who's in recovery for alcohol, drugs, tobacco, food, anger, lust, and hotel rooms for multiple days, putting myself in danger and trouble with the law. I often identify myself as a person who's allergic to alcohol, who breaks out in handcuffs and goes to jail. I would try to dry out and chill for a bit, and I would focus on how I would get myself in these situations, and I would blame my upbringing, my family, my girlfriend. I would be ordered to go to counseling or recovery programs, but I could never convince my counselor or program managers that it wasn't my drinking, it was that people just wouldn't leave me alone. I grew up in South Orange County in a mostly Mexican neighborhood with relatives in a 3-bedroom condo that hosted an alcoholic abuse, especially true for me. My teenage uncles were secretly exposing me and my brother to pornography and would try to abuse us at night. If I brought it up, it would be laughed at and thought of as humorous. I learned that I was alone, and the only way I could deal with this stuff is all changed when my family decided it was time to get a bigger place in the early 80s and bought a house in a predominantly white neighborhood in town. As we grew up, we would notice little things like being called beaner, Mexican, in a harsh, unwanted tone at school. In one occasion, I remember sneaking into a pool with my cousins and being yelled at by an older white gentleman, and the point of him yelling right in my face. He was telling me to learn English and to go back to my country. I was 10 and barely knew Spanish. I didn't even have the time to react or say anything before I was on the floor crying with my knees bent, I'm sure would be called ADD today. I was painfully shy and very emotional. By the time I was 12, I wouldn't like being home, so I chose to stay with my best friend Memo. He and I started listening to oldies and started ironing our clothes with tight creases, slicking our hair back, wearing our high socks. You know how they say the higher the socks, the downer the fool. But because we lived in rival towns, we knew we couldn't hang out anymore. I lost my only and best friend, and it broke my heart. In high school, in '88, I was put in mainstream classes, and I struggled to keep up, and it broke me. I didn't feel going to school, and I got a job, and I enjoyed the attention I got by being the guy who had money and drugs on him. Eventually, the lifestyle caught up, and I was hanging out with the homies. This was my new identity, my new confidence. All that bottled up rage I had stored inside was fueled by alcohol and drugs and violence and supplied the outlet I had for my anger. I could finally show everyone what I felt. I wanted to hang with the hardest dudes and learn from them. I got jumped in and I never looked back. I got away with a lot of things until I turned 17 and started being charged as an adult for participating in gang activity. And at 19, I picked up a case in LA while on probation and I served time in Wayside Supermax. When I got out, it was a long ride home. I had a moment of clarity. I remember the judge calling me a career criminal, and I thought, is this all I have to show for the work I've done? I was thinking maybe if I got the right girl, it would slow me down. And I was introduced to my future wife, Nancy. We felt like we were both we eventually didn't work, and we ended up partying more than slowing down. I was given an opportunity. There were a lot of gang-involved shootings at the time. I took it. I began working in the operating room where I was an orderly, and I thought this was it. Now I could get my life in order. I had my own apartment. I'm paying my own bills. My wife, Nancy, and those old demons of addiction came back full force. But I figured if I could just get married and everyone's of my addiction and my second life I was living. She soon left after, scared, but God. On October 2001, I was alone on a fort, and as the sun rose, a single ray of light went through the blinds parallel to my swollen red and jaundiced, weary eyes. I felt the gentle presence of God on my shoulders and a whisper as clear as I can remember saying, my son, stop killing yourself. This is not the plan I have for you. My reflection was covered in tears and I slept. Seemed like forever. When I woke, I knew it was God that morning and I was driven to the absolute clarity, and I went into action, calling and getting myself checked into rehab. When I got out, I wasn't working a program, and I became a workaholic with the idea if I'm always working, I won't slip. I did. I ran into my homie Memo from way back in the day. He got sober at 20, and there was a light about him, and he was so happy with the no matter what circumstances. I asked Memo, what's your secret, bro? He smiled and he said, I got Jesus, homie. Come to church with me and I'll show you. I went to his church and truly surrendered to Christ in August of 2002, and I started attending Salomon and Pastor John Baker. And my new sobriety date is June 24, 2002. I was willing. With my new relationship with God, how could I fail? I joined a step study, got tired of me because every time I would go in front of the group, I would just cry continuously. And it's like they would make fun of me. In my head, I was saying, they're making fun of me. Like it was that crying cholo guy again. I didn't care. Part of the process of being vulnerable. I didn't have anything in common other than just being a broken down individual seeking healing through our Lord Jesus Christ. At the completion of my step work, there was a new light in the world. My scowl turned into a smile. I have forgotten the people that have hurt me, forgiven the ones that have hurt me, and the ones that are still trying to hurt me, I love from afar. I've even broke bread with rival gang members. I have a new sponsor, new relationships, new confidence, and I can finally be the best version of myself. God took me further than I ever imagined and has been defining a purpose for me without limitations. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Carlos. We appreciate you and we appreciate what you just shared with us. My name is Megan. I am a grateful believer and I am in recovery for codependency, perfectionism, and compulsive behaviors. I'm also the Celebrate Recovery director here at Saddle. It was born actually 30 years ago this month. So what a great night we've had. I hope that you have heard stories of hope and freedom. And, you know, we've just heard from so many people about how really obstacles need to be removed for our liberation. And what does that look like? As Pastor Johnny said at the beginning, we all have hurts, and those hurts can hang us up if we don't authentically walk through them with Jesus. And those can lead to destructive habits. And we know as Christians, it is for Jesus, that it's for freedom that Jesus has set us free. So what I want to do right now is talk about next steps. What do we do now? So we talked a lot about something called Step Study. For those of you who have been in Celebrate Recovery for a while, you know that steps, and it's a safe space. It's a safe space to work these steps, step studies to occur. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a link in the chat, and we're also going to put a QR code on the screen. So if you want to take out your phone and take a picture of the QR code, what that's going to do is that is going to bring you to a information page so that you can sign up for the color led by people of color. And what I mean by people of color is Black, Indigenous, safe spaces nationally where people can work through the steps. So link in the chat. And just to talk a little bit more about step studies, those are going to be launched in January. So we are wanting to see if you are interested, if you would like to participate in these healing steps. So quick, take a picture of that QR code before it disappears. And know that if you have heard a lot and you're saying, how do I get a hold of this freedom? And you are a person of color, we want to be able to serve you in this way and create these safe spaces and take next steps. So what you'll do with that link is you will sign up. You're going to have men's and women's step studies. So we always have gender specific step studies, and we'll have step studies for different time zones. So we really want to offer this as a next step as we hear these stories of freedom, as we talk about these safe spaces. We want to make sure that those are provided for every person, because we believe that God wants every one of his children to be set free. So on behalf of cultural communities, of Cheryl Luke, Pastor Johnny and Jenny, Dr. Anita, and the whole team, we want to thank you so much for joining us. And so we want to thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again at one of these events. So thank you for joining us.